just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Last night's debate, we'll see who won. We'll talk about the stunning number of views that Donald Trump got with his interview with Tucker Carlson on Twitter, or X, or whatever we choose to call it these days. We have an exclusive UK sit-down interview with last night's big winner of the debate, Vivek Ramaswamy. We'll also talk about debanking. Isn't it funny? Rose West, the mass murderer, keeps her account. Nigel Farage gets closed down. Something wrong there, I think. But first, before all of that, let's get the news with Ellie Costello.
Thanks, Nigel. It's 7:01. I'm Ellie Costello in the GB newsroom. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has sent his condolences to the family of the Wagner Group leader who was reportedly killed in a plane crash north of Moscow yesterday. Yevgeny Prigozhin was one of the 10 people named on the jet's passenger list. Mr. Putin described the mercenary boss as a talented businessman.
I knew Prigozhin for a very long time, since the early 1990s. He was a man with a complex destiny, and he made serious mistakes in life. He achieved the results he needed, both for himself and when I asked him for the common cause, as in these last months. He was a talented person, a talented businessman. He worked not only in our country and worked with results, but also abroad in Africa in particular.
GB News understands the government is looking to block the former NatWest chief executive's multi-million-pound payout. Dame Alison Rose quit after it emerged she talked about Nigel Farage's finances to a journalist. Her actions are being independently investigated. The backlog of asylum cases has hit a record high. More than 175,000 people were waiting for an initial decision on their application at the end of June. That's up 44% on last year. Donald Trump is due to surrender himself on charges of trying to overturn the result of the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. These are live pictures outside the Fulton County Jail. We're expecting him to arrive later. He's facing dozens of criminal charges and will go on trial several times in the next 18 months, with Georgia prosecutor wanting October start for the Trump election trial. Now, patients are being warned of severe delays as NHS consultants in England strike for 2 days. Routine hospital care is expected to come to a standstill, with NHS leaders anticipating major disruption. The British Medical Association also announced that medics will go on strike in late September and early October. The number of students receiving the highest GCSE grades has fallen from last year, but is still higher than before the COVID pandemic. It follows a spike in higher grades in 2020 and 2021, when exams were cancelled because of COVID and results instead were based on teacher assessments. And finally, London Zoo is staging its annual weigh-in. Penguins, tigers and gorillas are among the 14,000 animals being measured by zookeepers over the next year. The zoo says it wants to make sure that every animal is eating well and growing at the rate it should. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nigel.
Good evening. Well, there were 8 presidential hopefuls on the stage in Milwaukee last night. There was one chap who was missing, a fellow by the name of Donald Trump, but kind of his presence was felt. But let's just have a quick look at the highlights of that debate last night.
This decline is not inevitable. It's a choice. We need to send Joe Biden back to his basement and reverse American decline.
Is that Joe Biden's Bidenomics has led to the loss of $10,000 of spending power for the average family.
Now is not the time for on-the-job training. We don't need to bring in a rookie. We don't need to bring in people without experience.
And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion?
And this issue is, of course, very important, but I am on the record and I stand behind that we should not have a federal abortion ban.
I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax, and we have to declare independence for it.
I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here.
This is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
Whether or not you believe that the criminal charges are right or wrong, the conduct is beneath the office of President of the United States.
Who says he may be disqualified under the 14th Amendment from being president again as a result of the insurrection.
Well, it was lively, and there was a very clear winner. We've got some exclusive polling that we'll show you in just a moment. But while all this was going on, something else was happening. Yes, Tucker Carlson, formerly of Fox News, now broadcasting on Twitter, he interviewed President Donald J. Trump. And this is what Trump had to say during that interview about the indictments.
I think the people of our country don't get enough credit for how smart they are. And I'm not sure I would have said this 10 years ago, but they get it. You know, they really get it. When somebody gets indicted, your poll numbers go down. When somebody gets indicted, you announce, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be leaving to spend time with my family and to fight for the rest of my life on this stuff. But you're out of politics. I got indicted 4 times. All trivia, nonsense.
Well, unbelievably, that interview that was conducted by Tucker Carlson with Trump has been viewed on Twitter over 200 million times. Just the most extraordinary number. I have to say, I think as time goes on, Fox News are going to regret not having Tucker Carlson with them. The big event today will take place later on, and it's almost difficult to believe that I'm saying this, but the 45th President of the USA, Donald J. Trump, will be heading later on this afternoon to Fulton County Jailhouse, where he will be arrested and charged, and there'll be a mugshot photograph taken of him. This was one of Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, that was taken yesterday. And that is where Trump is going to be. It's never happened before in the history of the USA. It is a truly, truly astonishing moment. And there was Rudy Giuliani yesterday. Difficult to believe that all this is going on. I'll be debating in a moment. What does this do to voters in the middle ground? What does it do to people who aren't very political? Does it give them a sense there's a real injustice going on here against Trump? Or do they say it's just too much drama, we can't be dealing with this anymore? Well, James Johnson from JL Partners and formerly number 10 Downing Street pollster, who has moved to America with his polling company. You're the only polling company that did a snap poll last night on the winners and losers. What are the results?
So we went out to a sample of 500 Republicans across the US, representative sample, and we asked them who won the debate, who performed best. And right at the top, well, it's the guest who's on your show later, Nigel, Vivek Ramaswamy, with 28% of the vote. Very close behind him, Ron DeSantis on 27%, and then quite down in third, Mike Pence on 13%. Everybody else coming below 10%. I think Asa Hutchinson, Doug Burgum were nearest the bottom, Chris Christie quite near the bottom as well. So a great result for Vivek Ramaswamy. He managed to introduce himself on the national stage. He got some real hits in, and I expect we're going to see him get a bit of a poll bounce in those state polls that we'll see coming out over the next few days.
Well, I have to say, I did tell you this, folks, didn't I? I've been talking and writing about Vivek Ramaswamy for the last month. He strikes me, it was interesting, wasn't it? I mean, in a way, what he was doing was what Donald Trump did in 2016. He comes in and says, I've got no political baggage. These guys on the stage with me all have. I'm the new kid on the block. And it was interesting, wasn't it, that he was being attacked by the others.
He was, and a lot of people after the debate were saying, oh, we think Nikki Haley won, because she had that moment where she confronted Vivek Ramaswamy on Ukraine and on Israel. Actually, despite the cheers that she got in the room, the average GOP primary voter is a little more sceptical of those arguments about Ukraine, and they were very much on Vivek's side. It reminds me a little bit of 2016, if you remember, Donald Trump's first debate, when he got booed and he said, these aren't the real voters, these are all the donors and the special interests. And it was a real moment, and you saw a bit of that this time as well.
I think that's right, and I think most people who would have bought tickets to attend last night would already be aligned to the Haley campaign, to, you know, maybe the Chris Christie campaign, or whatever it may be. And Ramaswamy would not have had natural long-term supporters, which I think makes his result the more remarkable.
It does, and we asked another question at the end of the survey as well. We said, who do you think, reflecting on it all, who do you think's the real winner? And we threw Donald Trump in the mix. Now, even there, Vivek just pipped Trump to the post.
Did he really?
He did. Now, you know, let's wait and see. I'm sure that's not going to be reflected in the other polls, but it does show that excitement and that sort of, you know, he's given us a few new ideas that I've got quite excited by. But I wouldn't be your boring resident pollster on this trip, Nigel, without saying, you know, there is a margin of error on these polls, and Ron DeSantis' performance was, we do indeed, Ron DeSantis' performance was pretty good. You know, a lot of people were writing him off, saying his campaign's over. He got a lot of moments in there, people didn't really attack him, and he managed to, as I say, almost top the poll. So his campaign is going to be happy with this as well.
Yeah, has he ever smiled in public?
I mean, there was a bit of a delay, wasn't there, last night on his smile? He sort of said something, then it was a sort of 5 seconds, then he did his smile. It was all about Gordon Brown, circa 2010,
yeah,
I thought.
He doesn't come across as a very happy, cheery fellow,
no.
but some very powerful points that he made. James, great stuff, and we're going to be back a lot here between now and those elections next November, and we'll be keeping up to date with the polls with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
For joining us, and well done for getting that poll out. Now, as I say, it's a massive day in American history. Trump heading off to Fulton Jailhouse. It really is hard to believe that I'm actually saying that. What impact is that going to have? One thing for certain is that with the Republican base, if anything, it strengthens Donald Trump. And, you know, talking to activists here last night, they just see a huge sense of injustice. I'm actually quite scared about where this goes. You know, the old left and the old right, they disagreed with each other, but fundamentally, they did believe that the other side had the right to have an opinion. So much of the modern left believe they are morally superior to those who are conservatives and are prepared, frankly, to do anything to shut those voices down. And I'm fearful for America. I'm fearful that if large numbers of people start to completely disrespect the judicial system, disrespect the whole democratic process, that they'll turn to other means. I'm very, very scared about it. I wonder what Greg Swenson, Republicans Overseas UK chairman, is, and London merchant banker. Do you take my point, Greg, that society operates within a set of rules? And, OK, we didn't win the election, the other guys did, but next time we'll get them back. We've grown up with that, haven't we?
Right.
The principle of losers consent. And one of the accusations against Trump is that he hasn't given losers consent last time. Rather like they're the Remainers in the United Kingdom. Yeah. But I'm fearful. I mean, I see what's happening, indictment after indictment. I mean, a stunning 41 charges that Trump and others face this afternoon in Georgia. At what point do people say we've got to take the law into our own hands?
It's worrisome, and I think when you lose trust with the justice system, and you're seeing it with the DOJ, the FBI, even the IRS, who's done a great job of protecting the Biden family influence peddling cartel. That really worries people. And then so you're comparing, and I think context is important.
It's a Biden family cartel, isn't it?
It really is. It's
really
not Hunter. That? It's not Hunter. It's the Biden family. It's Joe. Joe is the influence, right? I mean, Hunter wouldn't have gotten any of this money if he wasn't.
But there isn't now a special counsel that's been appointed.
Right.
So things may change.
I'm skeptical, and again, back to your argument that there's distrust with the system. The special counsel is the DA that was protecting Hunter and President Biden and avoiding any mention of President Biden in any of these inquiries. And then he's crafted the sweetheart deal. He's supposed to be the prosecutor, and he crafted this deal. So this is what worries people, this two-tiered justice system, and the double standard. And I think that's important. You don't have to be a Trump fan. And I think even you saw that on the stage last night. The weaponization of the Justice Department should be troublesome to fans and foes.
Well, I have to say, I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased that in the UK, the prosecutors are separate to the elected politicians. I think that's a very, very good thing.
And they should be.
That we have. How do you feel about Trump going to the jailhouse this afternoon?
It's a sad day, sad day for everybody, not just for Trump, for the other co-defendants as well as for the American people. I mean, this is, again, the weaponization of the justice system. I could be a critic of Trump on other issues, and you can argue that his behavior was not perfect, after the election, and you can, if you feel that way, you should not vote for him. And I think Alan Dershowitz makes a great point that way. He's voted against him several times, and he looks forward to the chance of voting against him again.
We had him on the show last week. He was terrific. I'm not a Trump supporter, but what's happening is wrong in every way. Last night's debate here, the 8 of them, what did you think?
I'm with James on that. I think, Vivek clearly was the winner and the attention getter, because he's good at it, and he's a great orator, right? So I think mission accomplished for him, because he came out guns a-blazing, and it worked. And I also think Governor DeSantis did a great job. He stayed in his lane. He was not attacked, because I think the other candidates were, probably more worried about the rising Vivek, but also they don't want to get in a fight with Ron DeSantis on the stage. What Governor DeSantis does really well is fight back against hostile media. And you've seen it countless times when hostile media, which makes up stories about him or outright lies, he comes back really well. He's not a great speech giver. And it's funny comments about the smile. I mean, it seems a little bit canned, but that's because he's not a backslapping kind of retail politician. He's a great family man. He served his country in the military, and he's got an unbelievably...
You're a big DeSantis fan.
I am. I mean, I really am, and I have been for a long time. It's not just in the last few months, but he's got an unbelievable proven track record as a conservative. And you notice the three leading candidates, if you consider Trump, DeSantis, Vivek, they're all traditional or anti-establishment guys.
We are so far away from
the country club Republicans
from
not
Mitt
coming
Romney
back.
And 10 years ago, that populist wave that ran through republicanism is here, and it's here to stay. And of that, I've got absolutely no doubt at all. And a final thought, if I can, Greg. Fox News has been your channel. It's been the Republican Party's channel. It's been rock solid behind the leadership, behind candidates. Something's changing, isn't it? I mean, I guess it began in a way with Elon Musk buying Twitter. Right. Paid a crazy price for it, but hey. But when you see the power of Twitter last night, of Carlson and Trump sitting down together, 200 million views. Are Conservatives losing faith in Fox News?
I think so. I mean, when you look at the numbers, they're down a third since Tucker left in many metrics. You also have to consider that even when Tucker was there, and he was by far the #1 cable show in the U.S., very similar to your show in terms of, you know, population adjusted, of course, but on a great night, he'd get 3 million viewers. There's 350 million people in America, and 3 million are watching Tucker, who was the best in the business in the United States. So, you know, that shows you that the model's changing a bit. He's getting many more views, obviously, on Twitter. Probably the best thing that ever happened to him was getting fired by Fox. And you also have to consider Murdoch, you know, made some really wise business decisions in the 90s when he started Fox News, got a great audience, killed the competition. But again, it's, you know, not that many people actually watch it.
Something's changing.
Yeah,
something
really
is changing. Greg, thank you
Good to
very
be here.
much
Thanks,
indeed
Nigel.
for your thoughts. In a moment, it appears that Dame Alison Rose leaving NatWest Bank isn't just going to get 2.4 million. No, it could be nearer to 11 million. But the story that really, I mean, I'm having difficulty sitting on my chair, is that mass murderer Rose West gets to keep her bank accounts, but Nigel Farage gets cancelled. All of that in just a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, the whole debanking row, the debanking scandal of myself and Coots, part of the NatWest group, it feels like this story is literally never ever going to go away. It keeps coming back. Well, let's begin by being joined by Chris Hope, GB News' political editor, and Chris has an exclusive story on this. Chris, I was furious yesterday that they've said she can get her 2.43 million, but further research shows that with the shares she's managed to accumulate since 2016, it's actually more like 11 million quid. I mean, not bad, is it? You break the law, you breach confidentiality, you lie, and you walk out with 11 million quid. But they'd done all of this before the inquiry, before the investigation, and before delivering to me the NatWest subject access request. So where are we now with all of this?
That's right, Nigel. Now, ministers' ears have pricked up here in London at the idea that Dame Alison Rose might get this large payoff. They're concerned about it because this inquiry by Travers Smith, this law firm, into what happened with you and your bank details and what was disclosed to the press about them, they're going to look at this closely. Now, I've been told very clearly by senior figures in the Treasury that if they find suggestions of wrongdoing by Dame Alison Rose or other senior people within NatWest, then they will expect money to be docked from bonuses. It's called a malus clause. Bonus being good in Latin, malus meaning bad in Latin. A malus clause will mean that money is taken away from the settlement given to Dame Alison Rose. She's currently working on a 12-month gardening leave, but I think ministers are watching very closely. And of course, the government here has a special locus involving this company. They own 38% of the shares. That's you and me own 38% of NatWest. Therefore, they are the biggest shareholder. What they say counts. So yes, Nigel, it's not over yet.
No, and I did, very loudly and clearly yesterday say I thought the government should act because, as you say, the government's the biggest shareholder on our behalf. I just still find it extraordinary that they can make this award to her before the result of the investigation. I find the whole thing. I think Sir Howard Davis should go, the whole board should go, frankly. Now, it seems that the mass murderer, Rose West, has a better ESG rating with the cooperative bank than I did with Coops. Perhaps she's a climate campaigner. I just don't know. I mean, what do you, as an old Fleet Street hack, what do you make of this story?
Well, you literally couldn't make it up. Now, separate to this, the Telegraph newspaper revealed today that Rose West, of course, a woman who murdered 10 women and girls, was jailed in 1995 for life, is in prison in HMP Newhall in Yorkshire, is banked by the Co-op Bank, the cooperative bank, and they looked at closing her bank account details a decade ago and chose not to, because of the risk. There's a problem there with Rose West's daughter. The Co-op, its slogan is ethical now and always, Nigel.
No, well, ethics, of course, must mean that you are supportive of drag queens reading stories to 4-year-olds. And mass murder doesn't matter. Mass murder is outside the ethical concerns of the cooperative bank.
Yeah, and the Co-op Bank, for its part, says we would not discuss individual customer account details. I mean, it does throw open a whole new can of worms for me. We know about politicians, people of note who might be risky for reputation. But what about banking criminals? What about banking prisoners? I mean, I think there's a whole space we don't know about. It's quite hard to find out because correctly, people's bank details are closely held privately. But this is the problem, I think, we're going towards. What will the government do next? Will there be a right to have a bank account that you can't get taken away from you? I always wonder whether there should generally be a right to an account. It seems the government's going towards that, possibly in law, maybe.
Yeah, Chris Hope, thank you. And I must say, I support the right for everybody to have a bank account. If you've served your time in prison and come out, I think you deserve to have a bank account.
Seems right.
Chris, thank you ever so much indeed. Now, Care for Calais is an organisation that I've talked about many times on this show. I have said, effectively, I think they are aiding and abetting illegal immigration. Doesn't make me very popular with mainstream media when I say that, because Care for Calais, they appear all over Sky News, the BBC and ITV as if somehow they're the good guys, they get a free pass. Well, the Home Secretary has had some pretty tough comments about them today as the boats continue every single day to cross the English Channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Non-governmental organisations involved with the whole issue of refugees, whether it's in the Mediterranean or whether it's in the English Channel. Frankly, I've always thought they were effectively aiding and abetting illegal immigration. Think about this. You know, Care for Calais are there in the camps on the other side of the Channel, and when people get off the lifeboat at Dungeness, there's Care for Calais giving them a bottle of water. Now, you could argue the work they're doing is humanitarian, the work they're doing is decent, but I've always had my grave suspicions. Now, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has come out and very, very clearly said about Care for Calais that they are, and I quote, politically motivated activists masquerading as humanitarians. And she says they are actively undermining efforts to cut illegal immigration. Now, Claire Mosley was the woman that ran Care for Calais for years, and funny, isn't it? She had an affair with a young man who was an attempted migrant in a camp in Calais that seemed to go on for a long time. She certainly never denied it. But now it turns out that 340,000 quid of donations to the charity have gone through her personal bank account. And as a result of this, there's been a serious rap on the knuckles that has come from the Charity Commission. Care for Calais defend themselves. They've got a new boss, Steve Smith, and a completely new board, but certainly pretty rum goings-on. Now, today the weather in the Channel was not good. About 200 across the English Channel today and being processed in Dover and Manston and elsewhere. But yesterday it was 345, the day before that it was 211, the day before that it was 661. It is ongoing, it is relentless, and if you look at the pattern for the last few years, it's towards the end of the year when we get the biggest numbers. And the reason for that's very simple, that actually the water temperature in the Channel is at its peak around about October time, and people choose to cross for obvious reasons when the water is a bit warmer. Well, I'm joined by former Border Force boss and now a managing director of Fortina's Global, Tony Smith, who is a long-term friend of the programme. We don't always agree about things, but he's always prepared to discuss this. Tony, the whole stop the boat strategy from Rishi Sunak, it appears he's rather changed tack on that over the course of the last few days.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was ever realistic, was it, Nigel, that we would completely stop the votes. I think you and I have been having conversations about what the number might be, and that conversation is perpetuated again today, and we're still speculating about what the number might be. You probably saw the figures that came out today. As of the end of June, the total number of asylum applications was 78,000. 75,000 last year. So asylum applications are up, but as you know, Nigel, the boats are still slightly down. I know you put a lot of that down to the weather, and but we're not seeing the huge escalation that some commentators were suggesting we would have had by this time last year. So I'm still optimistic, at least, Nigel, that we are doing something to stem the flow, at least. And I would like to stand up for some of the work that we have been trying to do with the French. But as you know, what we can do in France on the French beaches is severely limited by our capacity to intervene, because we can't control, ultimately, what the French or the EU decide to do on their border, can we?
No, we can't. And I also noticed, Tony, this week, another style of dinghy being used. There was a photograph I got yesterday. There were 82 people in that dinghy, one that landed on Saturday with 88 in it. So the boats are getting ever bigger. The operation is becoming ever more risky. And a change of tactic, Tony. They're no longer launching these boats down the beaches where they can be stopped with the police and a knife put in them. They're actually getting these boats to the beaches by water, and then the migrants are wading out through the water into them. And as you know, the tactic that is used by the French Navy, once they're afloat and in the boat, they escort them to the 12-mile line. Isn't that the conversation that we need to have with the French government? Should they not? Because the Belgians, reportedly, if they find an illegal migrant boat at sea, they take the boat and the people back to the harbour. Isn't this the conversation we need about the activities of the French Navy?
Well, the French Navy, certainly the French law enforcement agencies, Nigel, as you know, there's a number of them that are involved in this, of course, but they're a little bit like us in the Border Force. They're led really by the political strategy. And you're absolutely right. The political strategy in France is not to intervene on the water. Their argument has always been, of course, that, well, because the migrants don't really want to be rescued by us, and if we go sailing in there and trying to, pull them on board, then we could make things worse. So that's been the argument they've got away with, Nigel. But I don't think that's fair. Personally, I don't think they can get away with that. This is two civilised countries, both signatories to the 51 conventions, both signatories to law of the sea. We want to save lives, don't we? And they really can only help us save lives if they start to intervene on the high seas, with our help if necessary, or in the waterways you talk about. But you need to understand, people need to understand the jurisdiction of the Border Force does not extend beyond that 12-mile zone. We can't control what they do. We can only try and influence. And that's why we do need to keep on at this, Nigel. You're as good at it as anybody else. We do need to call them out. But in Brussels, we need to call out Brussels about why is it you will not entertain a conversation with us about joint patrols, which if you look my piece up, ever since day one I've been advocating joint patrols, perfectly feasible in international law, but it requires an international agreement.
Tony Smith, 100% agree with that. I really do. We'll speak to you on this programme again very, very soon. 800 million quid we've given the French to stop this problem, and I'm sorry, but the activities of the French Navy are completely and wholly unacceptable. Now, the What the Farage moment, it's ULEZ Day next Tuesday. Yes, if you're poor, you're going to be charged £12.50 a day just to go to the shops from next Tuesday. As you know, I'm doing a big Farage at large in a place called Cudham, which is on the borders of Sevenoaks and Bromley Borough. We're going to have a big crowd there. If you want to come, gbnews.com. There are 1 or 2 tickets still available. But the story that's out today, and it's pretty extraordinary, is that in areas like Bromley, up to 90% of the ULEZ cameras that Mayor Khan has placed have been vandalised, cut down, stolen and thrown away. You, of course, fully understand I would never, ever support law-breaking in any way at all. But I just do not see how this new zone is going to work. Because ultimately, when laws become enemies of men, men become enemies of laws. In a moment, we are going to have Vivek Ramaswamy sitting here, the man that won last night's debate, and a man I think that is not very well known outside of America. Well, in the next quarter of an hour, we're going to try and change that.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Let's have a quick look at something that happened last night. Fox News asked that panel of 8 who, if they became president, would pardon Donald Trump. Have a look at the body language here.
Signed a pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee. If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Chris Christie, honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against one man. And if people...
Well, one thing's for certain. My guest this evening, Vivek Ramaswamy, knows his own mind because his hand went straight up, and welcome to the programme.
It's good to be here, Nigel.
Very good to see you. So, you've come into this, you've written a couple of books where you've laid out quite a lot of your philosophy, so you're not a complete newcomer to public debate, far from it. You've been writing op-eds for years, for newspapers, etc. But in political terms,
yes,
you were, in fact, you were called a rookie.
Yes.
By former Vice President Mike Pence last night. How did you enjoy the big stage?
I enjoyed it tremendously. 2 hours went right by. I thought we were just getting warmed up. And, frankly, I took it as a badge of honor that I was actually the subject of most of the arrows that came from both sides of the stage. And it was actually a good opportunity to smoke out some real ideological differences, actually, within the Republican Party. I think they're deep. And I think that I'm going to have to be the person in this race and on the debate stage who smokes that out. Should we fight foreign wars that do not directly advance American interests or not? Should we actually unapologetically advance American interests even when it comes to domestic economic policy in the face of a climate change agenda that I think is fundamentally anti-American at its core? There were real disagreements on that stage last night, and I think that's what animated much of the debate, which I think is a good thing.
For our audience, who is Vivek Ramaswamy? Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm not a politician, you're right. My parents came to this country 40 years ago with no money from southern India. I've gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies. I did it while marrying my wife, Apurva, who's a surgeon at Ohio State. She's a throat surgeon. We're raising our 2 sons. One is 3.5 years old. One is just over a year old. I actually was just with them earlier this afternoon before coming over here. And we did it while following our faith in God. That is what we call in this country the American dream. And I am genuinely worried that that American dream isn't going to exist for my 2 sons and their generation unless we step up and do something about it. I haven't lived within government. I've founded a biotech company that developed 5 medicines that are FDA approved today. One of them is a life-saving therapy actually in kids. I built an asset manager called Strive Asset Management to offer an alternative to the likes of BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard by voting proxies in corporate America's boardrooms, by representing shareholders with a voice that says, get out of politics. Focus on profit. And that's been most of my career.
I'd say in some ways you sound a bit like Donald Trump in 2016, because Trump comes in and says, hey, I've never been in politics, I'm self-made, I believe in the American dream. So there's some strong similarities, I thought, yesterday. But it's interesting, you talk about business and success in business. I've been having a huge argument with the British banking industry over the last couple of months. I was debanked because of my political views.
I read about that. It's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite incredible that it's happening. But this sort of woke corporatism, it's gone so deep. And it starts in America, then it spreads across the pond. If you were president, what could you actually do about it?
So let me actually get to the essence of what's going on here. Actually, I think it started across the pond, spread over here, and then spread back.
No, we're blaming you.
No,
anyway.
no. I'm making a deeper point here of history. It started on the other side of the pond long before 1776. See, the old world European view was that the people, the citizens of a nation, cannot be trusted to sort out their differences. It had to be a small group of business leaders and government leaders in the back of palace halls that decide what's right for everyone else at large. So in 1776, in the American Revolution, we fought one in this country to say no to that vision. We, the people, decide how we're going to address shared challenges, from climate change to racial injustice to whatever they may be. That was the foundation of the American Revolution. And so what you're seeing in the rise of this new woke corporatism, the ESG movement, environmental social governance factor movement, that pervade capital markets around the world like a cancer, is a skepticism of that American revolutionary view. They say the people can't be trusted, so if governments aren't going to get it right on climate change, then we, the business leaders, are going to have to step up and fill the void, working with those government officials to do it. And so what's at stake in these issues, it's not just a little annoyance of our modern culture. It is that too. But it reflects a deeper skepticism that citizens can be trusted at all. So what can I do as U.S. president? Well, I mean, this gets into a lot of minutia here, but Biden has passed a new rule. I think it's an unconstitutional regulation, but it's codified and effectively is the rules as of today that investment fund managers no longer have to take into account profit as their sole motivation. But they can take into account these other environmental factors. So I would rescind a lot of that damage.
On the environmental stuff, I mean, you were very clear on the stage last night that America needs to frack, America needs to be self-sufficient, America needs to be an energy exporter.
Yes.
And you were very clear on that, and I get that 100%. And I have to say, I have a very similar view for what we ought to be doing back in the United Kingdom with that issue. But when it comes to climate change itself, you know, man-made CO2 is leading to ever-rising temperatures and ultimate doom and disaster. Are you a denier on climate change? Where do you place yourself on that?
So I'll just state the facts, because a lot of these labels are reductionist, and most people who are using them have no idea what they're talking about.
True.
So are global surface temperatures going up? The answer appears to be yes. Is that related in some way to man-made causes? The answer appears to be yes. Is that anywhere close to an existential risk for humanity? Absolutely not. And in contrast to the climate change agenda, our best approach forward is adapting to the changes in the climate, as we always have, through not less but more use of fossil fuels and also other forms of energy, most notably nuclear energy. And so my view is we have to look at the facts. If you look at the number of people who die of climate-related disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, heat waves, it is down by 98% over the last century.
Now, watching mainstream media, you wouldn't believe that.
You would never know this, but this fact, nobody who's credible on scientific communities or familiar with the data will deny this, because it's a hard fact. For every 100 people who died in 1920, 2 died today of a climate-related disaster. You want to know why? More plentiful, abundant access to fossil fuels. 8 times as many people die of cold temperatures as warm ones. Let's think about that fact. Oh, and by the way, in the 1970s, the climate change movement was actually about warning of a looming ice age unless we stop.
I'm old
using
enough
fossil
to,
fuels.
I remember it as a kid. Yeah,
Well,
no, I do.
I'm young enough to see the images of the magazines on the internet. They used to warn of it. But the reality is this is from the 1970s, not that long ago.
But this gets to the heart of something else that I think is really important, Vivek, and I think you care about. You've got 2 kids, you mentioned that earlier. My feeling is, you know, right across the Western world, frankly, our kids are being indoctrinated at school, they're being poisoned at school. They're not being taught critical thinking, they're not being given both sides of an argument. What would you as president do with education in America?
So we have to restore education through putting achievement first. That means getting rid of teachers' unions. If you're a public teachers' union and you're unionizing, who are you unionizing against? It's not against some monopolist capitalist. You're unionizing against the students, the public that you're supposed to represent. So I would shut down the U.S. Department of Education. It is a disaster.
You shut it down?
Shut it down. Close it, shutter it.
But wouldn't that be just complete
Sell
chaos?
the building? No, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be. In fact, it would be a great way.
Who's going to run it?
Well, it doesn't need to be run, because education in the United States is administered locally, not centrally by the federal government. So take that $80 billion, that's a lot of money, and put it in the hands of parents, many of whom are poor parents in the inner city. They can't afford to send their kids to a properly performing school, effectively trapped in a ghetto known as their zip code. And I think that is the civil rights issue of our time, giving parents the opportunity to send their kids to the best possible school they can by shutting down a bureaucracy that's sapping up money that should be in those parents' pockets. Then I want the public schools to compete, but they only compete if there's feet held to their fire. The dirty little secret in the United States of America, this will shock perhaps viewers in other parts of the world, but it's a dirty secret that deserves to be exposed. The schools that spend the most money on a per-student basis, some schools in New York, $40,000 per student per year, are the schools that have the worst achievement results on a per-student basis. Just think of it. That's mind-boggling. It's not just that you're not getting your money's worth. It's literally the schools that are spending more are doing, in absolute terms, worse than the schools that are actually doing much more with less.
And some would argue that those that are doing worst in the education system in America are those from the black communities, that there is huge racial injustice. We saw the Black Lives Matter movement, which I have to say I recognise as a Marxist force when it first arrived.
Yes.
But how do we deal with this? Is positive discrimination, is making sure that a company employs a certain number of black people or Asian people, is that the way forward?
No. The right way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. John Roberts said it famously in the Supreme Court 25 years ago. It's every bit as true today. Here's the answer. Economic empowerment across the board. I mean, the thing I'm talking about in terms of shutting down the Department of Education, putting that money in the hands of parents, well, you know who's going to benefit from that? A lot of kids in the inner city. And a lot of kids in the inner city, they do happen to be black. I don't think racial discrimination explains the differential in outcomes. You know what I think it does today? Fatherlessness. So any kid, regardless of their skin color, if they grow up in a single-parent household, are 8 times more likely to end up in jail, multiple times more likely to end up in poverty or on drugs, regardless of your skin color.
We see exactly the same in British citizens.
I mean, this is true for most of human history. So now let's just change the prism and see, okay, well, it turns out 45% of black kids are born into single-family households, whereas it's like 8% or less of Asian kids. That explains the difference in outcomes. It's not anything else
But it's
other
not
than
something.
basic numbers.
But the government can't do anything about
Well,
that.
here's what I will say. If the government was the source of the damage, the government can do something about it. So this starts with Lyndon Johnson in the United States. He was a president who took in the civil rights movement. In the name of helping black people in America, he created a lot of programs, aid, etc., that created awful incentives. So there are literally women in the inner city in places like Chicago, where I've visited as part of this campaign, that are paid more not to have a man in the house than to actually be married and have that man in the house. So I don't even blame the individuals. I blame
the system encourages this.
Yes, and you want to know call it systemic racism if you want, call it systemic failure if you want, but that's what the federal government can stop doing. Don't use taxpayer money to pay people to do the opposite of what you should be doing.
Some quick thoughts on the world stage. Historic relationship. 1776, 1812, we had a couple of difficulties, but a very strong relationship. We've been desperately looking to do a trade deal between the UK and the USA. The Biden administration obstruct it constantly. Would you be positive to that?
Yes, depending on the terms, of course. But I do think that entering stronger bilateral trade relationships with our allies is a crucial step in declaring economic independence from China.
You're not an isolationist?
No, I'm not an isolationist, despite the media headlines. I'm not an isolationist.
Not an isolationist? You're not part of Big Pharma, or are you?
I challenge Big Pharma. My relationship to Big Pharma is the equivalent of Rumble's relationship to Big Tech,
and I'm told,
which is declaring independence.
And I'm told you've been backed by Soros and many other, and you're a part of the WEF. And
this is all laughable stuff. This is laughable, but it's good. You know, here's my view on it. First, I laughed at this stuff, but then I realized that people in this country have a good reason to be skeptical of anything they've been fed, because we've been lied to time and again. And so I'm actually very sympathetic, even though I've answered these questions many times, to continue to do it. The World Economic Forum, let's take them. Nobody has been a bigger opponent of their agenda publicly, starting with my first book, than I have. So it's curious that my name then turns up.
See, this is what happens. You put your head over the parapet, you start to make some I've been there. You start to make some progress, and they fire everything they've got at you.
They do, but the funniest part is I did sue them. So I don't believe in just watching that and complaining about it. I believe in action. I sued them in court, and we got everything we wanted, including a hard commitment that they would never do that to somebody again.
You've been very supportive of President Trump and what is going to happen in the jailhouse in this afternoon in Georgia, in Fulton County, which I see as a travesty as well. If he said to you, and let's assume that he comes through this contest and the polls are right, let's assume that he does win the nomination, would you be happy to be his VP?
See, this isn't about me. If this were about me, sure, that's a fine position for someone to have at my age. This is about reviving our country, and I can only reunite this country if I'm doing it from the White House as the leader and the face of our movement. And what I will tell President Trump is, I know you're a patriot. I mean, he and I have a deep relationship of mutual respect. I want him as my most valued advisor, something of a mentor in that role, actually. I've got fresh legs. I'm less than half his age.
You're the rookie.
I'm good, and I wear it as a badge of honor. But we have to reach young people who have lost their sense of national pride in this country. 60% of them saying they would sooner give up their right to vote than to give up their access to TikTok.
I know.
That's a disaster. And so I think I'm the only person who can win in a landslide, and I think that's the answer.
I tell you what, thank you for coming on GB News. We're going to put this out. It's been out live. We'll put it out around the world. And I hope, folks, you now know who this guy is, because I think we've learnt a hell of a lot. I'm back with you live on Monday night at 7 o'clock in London. But now, let's have a look at what the weather's got in store for us.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A mixture of sunshine and showers to come on Friday, and a cooler feel for many, particularly across East Anglia and the southeast, where it's been quite warm and humid today, and we've seen a few thunderstorms as a result. This low pressure sitting across northern Scotland is still providing some heavy showers here, and they'll keep going through the night. Any of those showers still left across the southeast are fading away now, so much of England and Wales will become dry overnight, and it will be a cooler night, certainly than the past couple of nights for many. Temperatures well down into single figures in some rural locations, most towns and cities about 10 or 11 to start Friday. Now, we will start off with a fair bit of sunshine, certainly over the Midlands, South Wales, much of northeast England too. Elsewhere, there'll be more of a mixture of sunshine and showers, and through the day, showers will develop more widely, but I still suspect a good chunk of the day will be dry, particularly for East Anglia and the southeast. The showers fairly well scattered, not particularly heavy, but it will be a fairly wet and increasingly windy day across the far north of Scotland, and everywhere fairly cool for the end of August, high teens for most at best.